Hi, it's Dr. Brian McDonough. This may be one of the most important Dr. Brian McDonough shows I've ever presented. I'm going to be quick with the introduction. We're going to get right to it. Do you want to live longer? Odds are you probably do. So, how can you live longer? What are the things you need to do to live as long as possible? Now, there's all sorts of studies, all sorts of articles, numerous TV presentations. That's been done over and over again. But this is something very unique. It's called the 90 plus study. It was something that has been done at the University of California, Irvine, and it's been going on for decades. It is fascinating. So here's how it's going to go down. We're going to first talk about the things you need to do or should do to try to increase your lifespan. A lot of it's common sense, some of it's surprising. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about the study, and then we're going to finish up with information that is somewhat stunning about Alzheimer's. All I can tell you is if we were able to cure Alzheimer's tomorrow, we would only take care of 25% of dementia cases. It's the Dr. Brian McDonough Show, the 90 plus study. It's coming up next. Dr. Kawas, I first came across you actually on one of those, as we would call wormhole YouTube searches, where I was following up on certain things and saw an old 60 Minutes, 2014 edition, where they replay 60 Minutes. And they talked about what caught me right away was a study that you were involved in, which was based on a community called Leisure World, which is now the Laguna Woods, California community. But at that time, Leisure World was a place where if you wanted to live there, you had to fill out some sort of health survey. And as I saw from the 60 Minutes report, there were like 14,000 people who filled those things out. And I guess you recognized it as a treasure trove of information about lifestyle. And what you were doing was looking at people who were now in their 90s and finding out where there are certain things they did lifestyle wise that allowed them to live longer. Did I summarize that right? Or is that kind of what it was?
That was excellent, actually. Yeah, we wanted to see among 14,000 people who provided some information about their lifestyle and their health habits, compared to somebody your same age who took something or didn't take something or exercised or didn't exercise, who lived longer. So in our study, for example, in these 14,000 people, we wanted to see if you took vitamin E supplements, or if you took vitamin A supplements, or if you took calcium supplements, or if you exercised, or if you had a lot of non-exercise activities, were they related to how long you lived? And what we found was, first of all, at least the supplement information we had, taking supplements of vitamin E compared to people of your same age, those individuals did not live longer. Same with vitamin A, vitamin C. We found no support for taking these dietary supplements. What we did find was that education matters. Well-educated individuals live longer than individuals who had lower education. We also found that exercise mattered. Individuals who exercised as little as 15 minutes a day lived longer than people who didn't. 30 minutes was better. 45 minutes was the best. And mercifully for people like me, who are couch potatoes, if left to their own devices, 3 hours a day of exercise was no better than an average of 45 minutes a day. We looked at non-exercise activities, and here we put everything. So we put anything that had social engagement, anything that had cognitive engagement. So going to meetings, going to art museums, going to religious events, doing crossword puzzles, engaging with other people, playing bridge, all of those things added up. The more hours a day you spent when you were in your 70s was the average age at which we got this information. The more hours a day you spend, up to 8 hours a day, the longer you lived. So being engaged clearly matters a lot. Having a positive attitude, it turns out, matters a lot. People with positive attitudes on average live longer than individuals who don't have positive attitudes. So many of the things that your mother told you to do, the healthy lifestyle, that seems to be the most important thing.
Like, what did you learn about life yourself just from talking to all these people?
Oh, I'll tell you, one of the things that comes back the most often is purpose. Even their participation in the study has been rather amazing. So, out of those 14,000 people, we said if on January 1st, 2003, you were still alive and over the age of 90, we wanted you in our study. And at that point, there were roughly about 2,000 people who met that criteria. We managed to recruit 85% of them into the study, which I think can only happen with a group like this. And when you ask them why, I mean, the most common answer we get back is to give back, to do something for future generations, to contribute. I think that having a purpose seems to matter, a reason to get up in the day, and it doesn't have to be a job. It just has to be something that's important and keeps you going. But as individuals age, they particularly start talking about their legacy and the things they want to contribute to future generations. We have been doing MRIs and PET scans. We see them every 6 months with a variety of tests and a neurologic examination. And so we're busy trying to help understand all the things that they've taught us with all the data that they've given us and the DNA. And so it's a work in progress. What we found was that individuals who have modest alcohol intake, and by that I do not necessarily in any way mean daily even, but for example, even once a week, on average lived longer than individuals their same age who did not indulge in any alcohol at all. I think that alcohol in large amounts is not good for the body or the brain. It's possible that this modest alcohol intake was related to their longevity, but in an observational study, it's really important to remember that it's also possible we found this result because of the things that travel with alcohol. So perhaps cocktail parties or social engagement or things like that is really what's contributing to longevity, not the alcohol itself. We also found a similar result for caffeine, which was mostly due to coffee, but we did consider all caffeine sources. And here there was a sweet spot between 200 and 400 milligrams a day. So that roughly translates to 1 or 2 cups of coffee, depending on the size you're indulging in. But we also use caffeine from chocolate and tea and other things. But 200 to 400 milligrams a day was associated with more longevity than individuals who did more or less than that. I think that a good diet's important, but everybody wants me to say it's one thing, like eat a bunch of blueberries or eat a bunch of olive oil or something. And I think the components in and of themselves are not the only thing that matters. I mean, I think we need to have a diet that is high in fruits and vegetables. I think we need variety in our diet. I don't think any food is healthy if it's the same thing you're eating every day.
Was it lifestyle more than genes? Genes more than lifestyle? What did you see?
At least in the cohort we've got, I don't think I can really weight it because what I'd really need to see is also the people from those 14,000 who didn't make it to 90, right? And I don't have their DNA. But to me, everything in biology and human existence is a combination of those two things. We have collected DNA on these participants. Whenever they were willing, we have over 1,000 DNA samples, and we are now starting to look at them for certain kinds of genetic linkages and things that might be related to longevity. I mean, for years, we have known that if you want to live long, we used to say, pick your parents well. So on average, individuals who had long-lived parents are more likely to live longer themselves. But for example, this week we were discussing an individual who made it to 105, not only made it to 105, but in extraordinary shape with really good cognition. And this individual's parents both died around the age of, one died in, the mother died in the late 30s, and the father died under age 60. And yet they lived to be 105. So genetics isn't everything.
What have you learned from not only studying the brains, but knowing the people while they were alive as well, and what they were like symptomatically?
I think some of the most important things we've learned has been from that, actually. So, first and foremost, even though we often talk about Alzheimer's disease and talk about how it's the most common cause of dementia, it turns out that when we look at the brains of these individuals, 70% of the individuals in our study have not just Alzheimer's disease, but three or more dementia related pathology. So cognition is being hit as you age, not just by Alzheimer's disease, but by a lot of other possible things that contribute to loss of cognition. I think it's really important because one of the things that we've seen in our calculations is that if we were to cure Alzheimer's disease tomorrow, we would at most get rid of 25% of the dementia in this age group. And since the rate of dementia in this age is extremely high, we're talking about an awful lot of dementia, with numbers expected to quadruple by the middle of the century. Some of the other things that we found and that now we're starting to turn our attention to, if you look at the 60 Minutes show in 2014, and then 6 years later, 60 Minutes did a follow-up segment. And in that segment, they went and revisited the participants from the first show who were still alive. A couple of them were even celebrating their 99th birthday at that time. But we also saw the brain results of individual who was in the first show but had subsequently died. And this individual in the first show, I said, had Alzheimer's disease, and he looked to me like that's what he had. But at autopsy, it turned out there was no Alzheimer's disease in his head at all, but in fact, a condition which we now call late limbic predominant, age-related TDP-43 encephalopathy. We're working very hard on figuring out ways to diagnose some of these other conditions, including late during life, because for the most part, the only condition we have a chance of diagnosing during life in terms of biological markers is Alzheimer's disease. And until we understand how to identify all of those others, it's only in an autopsy study that you realize what really was causing the cognitive problems. Is a lot of people who die with fine cognition end up having one or two or three of these things actually in their brain nonetheless. And this is a concept we're referring to as resilience. And we're trying to find out factors that are related to resilience, because nobody really cares what pathology I find in their brains. They only care how their brain works and whether or not they recognize their loved ones and are able to do the things they enjoy doing. Probably about a decade ago now, we actually showed that microinfarcts, if we detected as few as 3 microinfarcts in the brain regions that we looked, which probably represents a load of hundreds of them, though, there was a strong relationship. And microinfarcts to physicians and neurologists, we generally consider to be you don't know when they have them. They're not symptomatic. They weren't considered particularly important. And yet now we realize that they're strongly related to cognition and in particular dementia. But I think even more interesting has been lately, we have seen that even when we don't find microinfarcts or big infarcts, that things like atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis in particular are also strongly related to dementia. You know, in the old days, we used to say dementia was hardening of the arteries, and I kind of feel like I'm going back full circle to that. When we looked at the analyses that suggested that dementia, if we cured it, of Alzheimer's disease, would only get rid of 20%, when we did a similar calculation for all the vascular lesions, including microinfarcts, atherosclerosis, or arteriosclerosis, it actually is about 40% of the attributable risk. That's actually very exciting because I think it gives us a potential place where we can intervene to maybe reduce the burden of dementia, even with some of the things that we already have. It's not just big strokes that cause dementia. All these small vascular lesions that we kind of think are not good or are risk factors for strokes and other things, actually in and of themselves appear to contribute to loss of cognition and aging.
you targeted people over 90, which is a group that really wasn't studied. I mean, it largely ignored. We worry about the 40-year-olds and the 50-year-olds, but by studying them, you must have been one of the first to really to have this opportunity to do this. And it has to be very exciting.
It has been. It really has been. I mean, so many years ago in 1984, there was a paper about how we could try to define Alzheimer's disease and diagnose it in individuals, at least in a similar way, so that we could then do research. And one of the things that intrigued me, I was in training as a fellow then, one of the things that intrigued me about it was that it said to get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, you had to be between ages 45 and 90. And I asked my mentor at the time, Dr. Robert Katzman, who was one of the authors of this criteria. I mean, what's so special about 90? I mean, why can't I diagnose it at 91 or 92? And he said, well, we just don't know. And afterwards, I became aware that, in fact, even in studies that had individuals often who reached that age because it was felt to be too much trouble or whatever, they just kind of let them fall along the wayside. And almost no research was being done in 90-year-olds. And it was just kind of treating them like they were just bad version of 70-year-olds. So we'll learn about things in Framingham or other studies, and we're just going to treat the 90-year-olds the same. And I mean, when I first started the study, I don't think everyone was convinced, but now we really, really feel 90-year-olds are not bad versions of 70-year-olds. In fact, they're very good versions of themselves, because many of the 70-year-olds won't even make it to that age. And we know in medicine that the diseases, the treatments, the risk factors, for children is not the same as it is for adults. We even know it's different for neonates compared to toddlers, compared to adolescents. And in medicine, we divide this up into 5 different specialties, but we treat older people as they're just bad versions of 60 and 70-year-olds. I mean, among other things we've found is that in people in their late 80s and their late 90s who develop hypertension at that age, they actually have a reduced rate of dementia compared to people who never develop hypertension in their entire life. So what we call hypertension, and might be a high blood pressure associated with bad outcomes in a 60-year-old, is not necessarily the optimal blood pressure for a 90-year-old. Many years ago, our president used to send a birthday card to every centenarian in this country, and that can't happen anymore. There are roughly 2 million people in the United States now over the age of 90. There is going to be 5 or 6 million people in this age range by the middle of the century. And one of my favorite quotes is that the children who are being born today, more than half of them will reach their 100th birthday in the United States.
Dr. Kawas, thank you so much for your time. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate it.
You're a great interviewer. Thank you so much, and good luck with this.